Hey, good evening. What was I going to do? It's a couple minutes before the 10-minute Bible study, which starts at 6:45. I came on a couple of minutes early just to say hello. Hope everybody's doing well. As always, this stream will continue on, and we will... At the end of the stream, we will go to a Zoom Bible study that anybody who would like to join us is more than welcome to join in on. And that will go from 7 until 8. And I am going to put the Zoom credentials in the chat, both right now and then afterwards. I will go to YouTube and Facebook individually because for some reason I'm not sure how the chat works on Restream. But at any rate, for anyone who is getting this chat, I'm just putting the Zoom stuff in the chat box now, and that Zoom will start at 7. So that's why it's the 10-minute Bible study, because I'm doing 10 minutes, then I get a 5-minute break, and then I go to the Bible study. So let's get started. We're going to start 1 minute early. We are looking at a couple of little stories tonight from Matthew chapter 12. Absolutely fantastic. And it's demonstrating some of the way in which Jesus deals with what I called haters. There's an escalation of challenges that he's getting from some of the religious leaders, and it goes from kind of genuine questions to attempts to trap him. And then he violates the Sabbath laws. They ask about it. It seems like, certainly when John the Baptist asked who he really is, that it was a genuine, honest question Jesus answered. And then when the Pharisees start questioning him about the Sabbath law breaking, he answered that as well in a kind of a genuine way. And at the end of that, in Matthew chapter 12, verse 13, and verse 14, it says, so he answered that, he healed. And then verse 14 says, but the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, they went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. So things have changed, right? Like the entire thing has changed substantially. And so that's what we're picking up. We're looking, beginning with verse 15. It says this, it says, aware of this, Jesus withdrew from that place, and a large crowd followed him, and he healed all who were ill. And he warned them not to tell others about him. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. Here is my servant whom I've chosen, the one I love, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought justice through to victory. In his name, the nations will put their hope. And that is a quote from Isaiah chapter 42. And there's a ton of stuff I think is interesting. So first of all, when the questions move from sort of honest inquiry to dishonest attempts to trap, and then ultimately plots to kill him, Jesus deals with his antagonists in a different way. So when it was honest questions, he answers honestly and genuinely, trying to help them see who he is. When it's traps, he did kind of like a verbal sparring with people. But when it escalates to violence, to intentional sabotage, the plot to kill him, he withdraws. Like he says, okay, I'm done answering your questions. I'm going to go somewhere else, which I think is not a bad sort of template for how we might deal with people that we're struggling with. If we're struggling with someone who is who's genuinely they don't understand or whatever, then we ought to try to bring them along. If we're struggling with people and it's just kind of like some fun jabs back and forth and some, and everybody's enjoying the argument maybe, then it's worthwhile sometimes, if you enjoy that kind of thing, to engage in that. But if we're sparring with someone who's really out for blood, the best thing you can do oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, and Jesus gives an example of it here, is just go away. So he goes away. tons of people still come to him to be healed. So he doesn't stop his ministry. He continues to do his ministry, but he tells them, don't like be obnoxious about it. Don't spread the word about me, kind of thing. And I think that's really interesting. And then the quote from Isaiah is fantastic because it answers three super important questions. Who is Jesus? What is his mission? And how is he going to go about that mission? And the first answer is, just in language very similar to what we got at his baptism, Jesus is God's designated person. He is the Holy One. He is God's Son. He is the one in whom I delight. I put my spirit on him. He's the chosen one. That's who Jesus is. What's his mission? His mission is he will proclaim justice to the nations. Right? He will proclaim justice to the nations. It's reminiscent of Luke chapter 4, recovery of sight to the blind, good news for the poor. That is Jesus' mission. And then the third thing is, how is he going to do it? And he's going to do it in a way that doesn't, it's not drawing attention to himself. It's not being at the head of the band. It's not, going on TV and yelling and screaming and begging for attention. Instead, he's not going to quarrel or cry out. No one's going to hear his voice in the street. He's not like the street preacher with the big sign doing the shock treatment stuff. A bruised reed he won't break, so he's going to be gentle. A smoldering wick he won't snuff out. So, a smoldering wick is one that's just on the verge of dying. He's not going to be reckless, in other words, till he has brought justice through to victory. In his name, nations will put their hope. So you can see who he is, what his mission is, and how he's going to do it. Fantastic stuff for us to think about, understand, and emulate. And then there's this fascinating thing that happens afterwards. So verse 22, then they brought him a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute, and Jesus healed him, so that he could both talk and see. And all the people were astonished. And they said, could this be the son of David? So the crowds are getting behind. There's a populism here, right? He's doing good stuff. You can't deny it. But when the Pharisees heard this, they're trying to figure out how to squash this guy. They're plotting to kill this guy, it said a few verses earlier. So what are they going to do? I know. We will say the good deed was done by the power of the devil. So it says, when the Pharisees heard what he had done, they said, it is only by Beelzebub, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons. Verse 25, Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he's divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? So the best commentary I heard on this was that there's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke, like, come on, man, aren't you rooting for Satan to get through this? But he's not going to, he's not that stupid is kind of Jesus' point. How can his kingdom stand? Of course, we don't want Satan's kingdom to stand. Verse 27, and if I drive out demons by Beelzebub, by who do your people drive them out? In other words, there are Pharisees out there doing these kinds of miracles too. Are they also using demonic power? So again, it's a little bit of a jab at them by, if I'm doing it by Beelzebub, then who are you doing it by? So then they will be your judges. But if it's by the Spirit of God that I drive out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. In other words, take this seriously. If it's by the Spirit of God, this is serious stuff. How can anyone enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man, then he can plunder his house? Verse 30, whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever doesn't gather with me scatters. And so I tell you, every kind of sin and slander can be forgiven. In other words, and I want to relate this back to what I was talking about a minute ago. If you have genuine questions you really don't understand, you're really unsure, that can be forgiven. If you're going to do a little verbal jabbing to try to sort things out, that can be forgiven. But but blasphemy, this is verse 31. Every kind of sin and slander can be forgiven, but blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. And it occurs to me that what he's talking about is gaslighting. When you accuse the person who's doing good of doing evil and you know it and you're doing it just to cause chaos. That can't be forgiven. That is evil to its core. And I think we need to think about that, not only religiously, but in all facets of life. Gaslighting, where we're intentionally deceiving people. A lot of the memes on the internet and you know, a lot of the false information that's out there in all kinds of places, particularly when it's done in the name of God. But I think even when it's not done in the name of God, it is evil, 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 evil. That's what Jesus is saying. Those are some of the things we're going to be talking about tonight. So join us on Zoom at 7 p.m. I'm going to go into the Facebook and YouTube videos as soon as I end this stream, and put the credentials in the first comment so that anyone who wants to join us can. All right. So have a great evening. God bless. Feel free to ask questions online, whether you're in the Zoom or not. Send me a direct message, leave a question in the comments. Any of that stuff is fair game. And again, have a great night. God bless.